Imagine staring into a lake and seeing something staring back that isn't you. 3 students broke a village taboo that was meant to stay hidden. They pulled a secret from the water that should have stayed buried. This isn't a ghost story. It's a warning. If you think the Red Lake is just water, you are dead wrong. It's a trap, and it's still hungry. Those who carry a piece of the dead will sooner or later become part of them. Ruby did not know this rule. Nobody warned him in time. The old man did warn him, but who listens to old men when you're 20 years old? Your favorite girl is right beside you, your best friend is with you, and the whole summer stretches out ahead. The folklore professor was an enthusiastic and slightly strange man. He believed that real stories don't live in books. They live in people, in old people, in remote villages, in places that tourists never reach and the internet never touches. And every summer, he sent his students out to exactly those places. Ruby found out about the assignment on a Friday. Their group was to travel through several villages, record local legends and beliefs, and hand in the material by September. Some of their classmates got a route to the sea. Some got the mountains. The 3 of them got the wilderness. Sami was louder than anyone else with his complaints. "This is the most pointless assignment I have received in 2 years of studying," he said, studying the map. "We're going to villages that do not exist on Google Maps to collect fairy tales from old women." "Legends," Kati corrected him. "Same thing." "It is not the same thing," she said calmly. "And stop it. We're going anyway." Ruby was looking at the map over her shoulder. Kati leaned into him a little more firmly, out of habit, without thinking. They had been together since their first year, almost 3 years. In all that time, they had not had a single real argument, only small disagreements that always ended in laughter. Ruby sometimes thought they had simply been lucky to find each other so precisely that it barely hurt at all. Ruby was looking at the map over her shoulder. Kati leaned into him a little more firmly, out of habit, without thinking. They had been together since their first year, almost 3 years. In all that time, they had not had a single real argument, only small disagreements that always ended in laughter. Ruby sometimes thought they had simply been lucky to find each other so precisely that it barely hurt at all. "I am driving," he said. "We leave Saturday morning." Sami sighed, but he did not argue. The first 2 villages were a disappointment. Abandoned houses, overgrown yards, a handful of residents. There were legends, but all the same ones, worn smooth. A well with a ghost, a bridge where some old man drowned, a tree you must not cut down because it brings bad luck. Sami recorded all of it with the look of someone serving a sentence. By the 3rd village, the navigator had started behaving strangely. It showed them driving across an open field and then placed them in an entirely different district. The road wound between the trees. Ruby drove slowly. 5 kilometers to the village," said Kati, looking at her phone. "But we have already driven 12. "Someone stole the signs," said Ruby. "Road signs. Scrap metal collectors take them. Then people have no idea which way they turned." He was right. 100 meters further, the road opened onto a clearing. Beyond it lay a village, small, alive. Lights burned in several yards. Someone was working in a garden behind a fence. "Ugh," said Sami, sitting up straight. "People." Behind the fence of the last house, two people were working. An old man, short and wiry in an old shirt, was digging a bed. Beside him, a woman in an apron was busy with something. Ruby got out of the car first. "Good afternoon. We have got a little lost." The old man leaned on his shovel and looked them over slowly. "What are you looking for out here?" asked the woman, wiping her hands on her apron. "We are students," said Kati. "We collect local folklore, legends, beliefs, stories." The old man perked up so sharply that his spade nearly fell. "Oh, now, that is my department. I could tell you enough for 3 dissertations, for a small consideration, of course." "Go and do your digging," said the woman firmly. "I will finish it later. Look at them, young people all the way out here. When does that ever happen?" The woman shook her head, but softened. "Is there somewhere we could sleep?" Ruby asked carefully. "It will be dark soon." "Stay with us," she said simply. "The house is big. Just keep the noise down." The old man's name was Mikal. Over supper, it became clear he was exactly the kind of storyteller they had been looking for the whole trip. He spoke vividly, with rich detail, holding his pauses in exactly the right places. Kati recorded him on her phone. Sami made notes in his notebook. Ruby simply listened, understanding that what they had here was real, not the worn-out stories from the first 2 villages. This was the living past, breathing in front of them. "And will you tell them about the Red Lake, Michal?" the woman said quietly. The old man put down his mug. He was quiet for a moment. "Better not to talk about that one." "Why not?" Sami asked immediately. "Because." "Michal," said Kati gently, "we record everything, even what people do not usually talk about." The old man looked at her, then at Ruby, then back at his mug. "All right," he said at last. "I will tell you, but listen carefully. This is not a funny story." "A very long time ago, a shaman lived in these parts," the old man began. "Not evil and not good. He simply was. He knew herbs, he knew the weather, he knew how to heal, and he knew when no one could help. People came to him with questions, and he answered them. He told the truth. Not the truth they were asking for, the truth they needed to hear. At first, they respected him. Then they began to fear him. And then a wealthy man came to him and asked about his wife. The shaman told him the truth. The wealthy man could not bear it. He turned the people against the old man, said he was evil, that he cursed people, that he was the cause of every misfortune. The woman quietly crossed herself. "They seized him," Mikal continued, "cut him down, threw what was left into the lake. They thought the water would take everything, but the water did not take everything. His soul remained. It attached itself to the place where he died unjustly. And from that day, the lake pulls people in. The shaman does not rage. He is simply stuck. Do you understand? He was killed without trial, without a last word, without anyone saying to him, "Go, you can go now. I am telling you this." So he reaches out toward the living. He grabs hold, but he cannot hold on, and they drown. The room went quiet. Outside, a cricket was chirping. The water looks red sometimes when the sun hits it. That is the rock underneath. Or his blood. Who knows? Beautiful place. Terrible place. "And how would you release him?" asked Kati. "Theoretically." Mikkel looked at her for a long time. "You would have to come, without fear, and say the words. We know what was done to you was wrong. You can go now." "And that is all?" "The price is high," said the old man quietly. "The lake does not let go easily. Whoever releases the shaman stays there themselves. That is the law of that place. Blood for blood, life for life." Nobody said anything. "Leave it alone," the old man added. "You will only bring trouble on yourselves." In the morning, everything seemed different. Sunshine, grass, the smell of freshly cut hay from a neighbor's yard. The old man's words had stayed behind in the dark, along with the night. "Let us go to the lake," Sami said at breakfast. "The old man said not to," Kati reminded him. "We will just look, take some photos," Sami insisted. "A proper project needs real photographs, not just text." Ruby looked at Kati. She gave the faintest shrug. 20 minutes, said Ruby. "We look, we photograph, we leave." The path led into the forest, right beyond the last houses. They walked through dense hazel thickets. The trees parted, and they stopped. Kati gave a soft gasp. The lake was small, ringed by old willows whose branches hung down to the water, touching the surface with long fingers. The water was clear and impossibly still, and in it, in the raking morning light, burned a reddish glow. Not blood, more like a sunset sky turned upside down, as if the lake held inside it someone else's dusk. White forest flowers grew along the bank. No litter, no fire rings, no flattened grass. The place was untouched, as if people had been walking around it for a very long time. "Beautiful," said Sami. His voice came out quietly. Sami, who never spoke quietly. Kati took out her phone and began shooting. Ruby stood beside her and looked at the water. In it were reflected the willows and the sky and the white flowers. And something else. Something that was not on the bank. "I am going in," said Sami. "No," said Kati immediately. "It is hot, and the water is clean. 20 seconds. Sami." But he was already pulling off his shirt. Ruby opened his mouth and said nothing. Sami was an adult, 20 years old, his own decision. Sami ran and jumped. A second of silence. Then the surface broke into spreading circles. "Help!" he screamed. "I am drowning!" Kati cried out. Ruby was already running. But Sami surfaced before Ruby even reached the water. He came up laughing, loud and satisfied. "Your faces! That is what you call a joke!" Ruby stopped at the water's edge. His heart was hammering in his throat. Kati stood beside him, pale, phone still in her hand. And then Ruby felt something shift inside him. "Get out of the water," he said. Sami was still laughing. "Come on, Ruby. It was actually funny. If you could have seen your—" "Get out of the water." Sami climbed out, stood in front of Ruby, still smiling, but more carefully now. "Why are you being like—" Ruby hit him. The fist caught him on the nose. Sami did not see it coming. He flew backward, caught his foot on a stone at the water's edge and fell, straight into the shallows. The back of his head hit the bottom. He lay still. "Ruby!" Kati screamed. Ruby was already in the water. He grabbed Sami by the shoulders and pulled him toward the bank. The bottom was uneven beneath his feet. Stones, something sharp. A sudden burning pain tore through his right palm. He did not stop. He dragged Sami onto the bank and laid him on the grass. Sami was alive. He coughed, spat water, opened his eyes. Blood was running from his nose. "You are insane," he rasped. "Do not ever do that again," said Ruby. His voice was level. That was worse than shouting. They walked back in silence. Sami went ahead, soaking wet, his head tilted back, one hand pressed to his nose. Kati walked beside Ruby. She looked at him, but said nothing. Ruby kept his right arm lowered. His palm was burning. Old Mikal was waiting on the porch. He looked at all three of them. At Sami's broken nose, at Ruby's dark hand, at all their faces. "Went to the lake," he said. Not a question, simply a statement. Nobody answered. "There will be trouble," the old man said quietly, and went inside. That evening, Ruby examined his hand. A cut on the palm. Not deep, but strange. The edges were already darkening. He rinsed the wound and found something hard inside it. A small fragment, white and dense. He pulled it out, held it up to the light. Bone. A small splinter of human bone. Ruby stared at it for a long time. Then, not knowing why, put it in his pocket. The shaman came in the night. Ruby did not hear him arrive. He simply opened his eyes and saw him. Tall, dark, dripping. Black rags that moved as if underwater. Long, tangled hair. Where eyes should have been, two pale points of light in the dark. "You carry a piece of me," he said. His voice was like water running over stone. "You found my bone. You carried it out of the lake. While it stays with you, I can speak to you. For the first time in a very long time." Ruby lay and looked at him. The fear was there, but somewhere behind his ribs, not on the surface. "What do you want?" he asked. "To leave," said the shaman. "I was killed unjustly, without a last word, without anyone saying to him, 'Go, you can go.' I heard what they told you. The old man, he knows. Many people here know, but they are afraid to come. And what will happen to whoever comes?" The shaman was silent for a long time. "You have already been carrying my bone for 2 days. The bond is growing. Soon, it will be permanent. You will hear me always, and I will take your strength until I have taken everything. You will kill me. No, said the shaman. You will fade on your own, like a fire when the wood runs out. Why are you telling me this? A long pause. Because I do not want this, said the shaman, and something alive entered his voice. I did not want to kill the people in the water. I was only grabbing hold. I did not know any other way. I am tired of this place. I want to leave. Then why do you need me? Why can you not simply let yourself go? I was killed unjustly. Nobody paid for it. To leave, a payment is needed. Voluntary, conscious. That is the law of this place. Blood for blood. Life for life. Ruby looked at the ceiling. So, whoever comes will die. Yes, said the shaman simply. And I will finally be able to go to the world of the dead, and the lake will be still forever. No one will drown there again. Kati was sleeping beside him. Ruby could hear her breathing, even and calm. He looked at her red hair spread across the pillow. The shaman disappeared before Ruby could answer. In the morning, Sami was different. Not angry, not resentful, though his nose was swollen and a purple bruise was blooming under his eye. Just distant, absent. He was sitting at the table in old Mikol's house, staring at one fixed point. In front of him stood a mug of tea, untouched, long gone cold. Kati came in first. She looked at him, then at Ruby, who followed behind. "Sami," she said carefully. He raised his head. His eyes were alive, but looking slightly past things. "I saw my mother," he said quietly. Nobody answered. Ruby sat down across from him. Kati stayed standing by the wall. "When I fell in the water, there was an icy current there. I went straight into it." Sami spoke evenly and flatly, as if reading out someone else's verdict. "I always thought she fell herself, slipped on the balcony. That is what everyone kept saying. That is what my stepfather kept saying. I was a child, and I believed them." A heavy pause. The old clock on the wall ticked loudly. "He pushed her," Sami said. "I saw it in the water. Every detail. He walked up behind her and simply pushed her in the back. I saw her face when she understood she was falling." Sami's voice did not waver once. "That bastard killed her, and everyone believed it was an accident. And I believed it too, for all those years." Dead silence in the kitchen. Outside, a rooster was crowing. Somewhere at the edge of the village, a dog barked. "What are you going to do?" Ruby asked, his voice low. Sami looked at him. For the first time all morning, directly, hard, fully present. "What I should have done a long time ago." He stood up sharply. He swept the car keys off the windowsill. Ruby did not even have time to react. One step, and Sami was already at the door. "Stop!" Ruby shouted. "Sami, stop!" But he was already outside. The front door slammed heavily. A second later, the engine roared under the window. Ruby ran out onto the porch. The car was already turning in the narrow village lane. Sami was not driving fast. He was moving calmly, evenly. His face held no rage, only cold certainty. Ruby pulled out his phone and called him. Through the windscreen, they could both see Sami's mobile ringing on the passenger seat. He had left it there on purpose. The car disappeared around the bend, leaving only a trail of gray dust. Ruby stood on the porch. Kati came out and gently put her arm around his shoulders. They looked in silence at the empty road. "What on earth did that water do to us?" she said quietly into the air. Ruby said nothing. He was thinking about the bone in his pocket, about two phosphorescent points in the dark of the lake, about the voice that went through you to the bone. Ruby understood that he would never be able to explain any of this to Kati. Some things cannot be shared with the people you love. They can only be carried alone, and he was already carrying it. They got home by bus. Old Mikal helped. He called someone he knew and sorted it out. The nearest service ran in 3 hours from the district center. A local neighbor drove them there in a battered old car, in silence, without a single unnecessary question. In small villages, people know how to stay silent when needed. Ruby and Kati sat in the back of the bus. She leaned against his shoulder out of habit. But the old ease was not there. The air between them had thickened. "You are hiding something from me," she said quietly. It was not a question, a statement of fact. "Everything is fine, Kati. Ruby, do not look at me." He turned his head. Her green eyes looked straight back at him. Red curls, a scattering of freckles. Kati never interrogated anyone. She simply felt dishonesty with her whole heart. "I will sort it all out, I promise," he said quietly. She studied his face for a long time, as if looking for answers there. "All right," she breathed at last. "But you will tell me everything when this nightmare is over." He nodded. His right hand lay on his knee. Under the dressing, the wound was pulsing. Slowly, in time with his heartbeat. It was not pain. It was the sensation of something foreign and alive that had taken root inside him. That night, back in their city flat, the shaman came again. Ruby did not flinch. He had been waiting for it. 3 days remain, the voice came from the dark. After that, the bond will close. You will become my permanent anchor in the world of the living, forever. I understand, said Ruby into the empty air. Have you made your decision? Not yet. You have only tomorrow left, the shaman warned. After that, the choice will be mine. Ruby turned his eyes to the sleeping girl. If I come to the lake, will Kati be safe? Yes, the shaman said. This bargain is only between you and me. She is free. Ruby stared at the gray ceiling for a long time. Why did you not choose someone else? Over all those decades, people drowned there. Many died, but no one carried my bone out, the shaman exhaled. No one kept it inside them for 3 days. You are the first who was strong enough not to lose your mind immediately. So I simply had spectacularly bad luck. Or the opposite, the shaman replied, quietly, almost sadly, depending on how you look at it. The shadow dissolved. Kati slept beside him, her breathing warm and even. Ruby lay awake until dawn. In the morning, he behaved perfectly. It was an act of life or death. Kati could sense things. If he had acted differently, she would have known. And he wanted to protect her at any cost. Not because he feared how she would react, but because she would not have let him go. And she would have been right. They drank their morning coffee. They talked about some stupid series they had been watching that week. Ruby smiled at the right moments, made jokes, drank his coffee in small sips. Kati laughed, moved around the kitchen, stacking dishes. Around midday, she mentioned she had promised to drop in on a friend. "Go ahead," Ruby said gently. "Have a nice time." "You will not get lonely here on your own?" "No, I need to get on with my dissertation. The deadline is creeping up." She came over and kissed him quickly and tenderly on the temple, picked up her bag, and slipped out the door. Ruby sat still and listened to the sound of her footsteps fading down the stairwell. Then the front door banged shut. Absolute, ringing silence. That was it. The time had come. He stood up, went to the writing desk, and pulled open the bottom drawer. He took out the bone fragment. Small, dirty white, almost weightless. A tiny splinter of someone else's death. Astonishing how much cursed power can be packed into something so small. Ruby picked up his phone. He opened his chat with Kati. He held his finger over the keyboard for a long time, searching for words. Everything inside him was screaming with pain. He typed, "You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Do not look for me and do not ask for explanations. Just live." He thought about it, deleted it. That would destroy her. He wrote again, simply and honestly, "I love you." That matters more than anything else in the world. He pressed send. He laid the phone face down on the kitchen table. Sami's car keys were in the hallway. Ruby dressed quickly, pulled on his jacket, and walked out of the flat without looking back. Outside, a perfectly ordinary, stupid weekday was in full swing. The sun was shining, mothers were pushing prams, some young man was arguing on his phone. The world was living its lazy life, not suspecting for a moment that right now, one of its number was driving away for the last time. Ruby got in behind the wheel and turned the key in the ignition. The car moved off in the direction of the Red Lake. He reached the village in deep twilight. The half-abandoned settlement met him with an ominous silence. By a leaning fence, like a stone figure, stood old McCall. He seemed to have known the young man would come back. The old man studied Ruby's face through the car window for a long time, then gave a barely perceptible, heavy nod. No words were needed. Everything was understood. Ruby nodded back, killed the engine, and set off along the overgrown path toward the forest. The forest around him, it changed. The shadows were long, unnaturally bent. Not a single bird call, not a rustle of leaves. The trees seemed to part reluctantly, letting him into their domain with resistance. The lake appeared suddenly, like a black opening in the trees. In the crimson rays of the setting sun, the water looked thick as sacrificial blood. Ancient willows bowed their trailing branches right down to the surface, and white water lilies along the banks glimmered faintly in the gathering dark. It was frightening, entrancing, and terrible. Now Ruby saw this place without illusion. It was a reservoir of centuries of pain, as tired of itself as its dead keeper. He stepped to the very edge of the water. His shoes sank into the wet moss. "I am here," Ruby said, not loudly, but with certainty. The water responded instantly. Without the faintest breath of wind, perfect, even circles spread out from the center of the lake. The shaman took shape right at the edge of the reeds. He simply emerged from the mist. Tall, dark, a silhouette of infinite exhaustion. There was none of the primal fury that had tormented Ruby in his nightmares. Before him stood a very old man whom an unjust death had locked inside this watery prison. "You came back," the ghost whispered. "I keep my word. You know there is no way back." "I know." The shaman looked deep into the young man's eyes for a long time. "Why are you doing this? You are alive." Ruby gave a bitter smile. He looked at the setting sun. "Because someone had to come, long ago, and because she has to live. That is enough for me." He took the first step into the water. An icy, otherworldly cold instantly drove through his legs and up toward his heart. Ruby walked on, stubbornly. The lake bed dropped away sharply. The water rose to his waist. It pressed against his chest, taking his breath. It came up to his shoulders. Stopping for a moment, he raised his right hand above the crimson surface and opened his numbed fingers. The bone splinter slid down and settled on the bottom without a single ripple. At that same instant, Ruby felt the invisible vice that had been gripping his soul for 3 days collapse. His hand stopped pulsing. The black rot vanished without trace from the wound. An unseen weight fell away. On the bank, the silhouette of the old shaman began to dissolve rapidly. He was not disappearing in fear. He was melting, the way morning mist melts beneath the first rays of sunlight. Calmly, peacefully. The last thing Ruby managed to notice before he slipped beneath the surface was the shaman's 2 pale eyes. There was no anger in them, no fear, only the weariness that had finally found peace. The water closed over Ruby's head, and the world fell into absolute silence. Kati read the message at 3 in the afternoon. "I love you. That matters more than anything else in the world." She smiled warmly, shook her head, and typed back, I love you too, you silly man. We are expecting you for supper. Pick up something sweet on the way." He did not come for supper. At first, she was simply annoyed, calling his number over and over. But Ruby's phone was ringing on its own on the kitchen table in the empty flat. An hour passed, 2, 3. Cold panic gripped her throat. Katie ran to the neighbors, then stumbled to the police, barely breathing through her tears. The empty car was found on the roadside near the abandoned village 2 days later. Divers searched the silty bed of the Red Lake for 3 days. They found nothing, only his trainers, placed neatly at the water's edge, side by side. Nothing more. The case file was closed with a brief entry: accidental death, drowning. Sami was arrested in the city that same day. His stepfather survived, but was left permanently disabled after the brutal attack. At the interrogations and at the trial, Sami screamed about the cursed lake, about the icy current, about the terrible truth the dead had shown him. The psychiatric report was unambiguous: acute schizophrenic psychosis, compulsory treatment at a closed clinic. Sami is still there. He sits within 4 walls and monotonously repeats the same story over and over. Naturally, nobody believes a madman. Old Mikal never once breathed another word about the legend of the shaman after that terrible night. When his wife sternly asked why he stayed silent, the old man only said flatly, "Because someone came along who paid the debt at last." The lake went completely calm. Local fishermen from distant villages said with surprise that for the first time in half a century, you could approach the water without a crushing fear. No more icy current pulling you down. No more strangeness. Just water. Clear, clean, faintly reddish in the light of the setting sun. Kati left that city, but to this day, she sometimes has the same dream. A lake, red as blood, and a man standing waist-deep in the water, facing her. She calls him. He smiles, and she wakes up. Every time, Kati jolts upright in a cold sweat, a dull ache in her chest. But for some reason, with a deep, absolute sense that everything is right, that it was supposed to happen this way, that Ruby did something great. She simply does not know what exactly. Those who carry a piece of the dead will sooner or later become part of them. Ruby knew this unspoken rule. Right at the end he knew it, and he stepped into the water anyway. If this story touched something in your soul, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It is what inspires me to search for and tell you new stories about the places and things that are better left undisturbed.